The year is 793 AD. Monks at Lindisfarne Monastery on the English coast are going about their morning prayers when they see ships on the horizon. Dragon-headed longships, dozens of them. Within hours, the monastery is burning. Monks are slaughtered. Gold and silver are loaded onto ships, and the survivors watch in horror as these blonde-haired warriors disappear back into the mist, leaving nothing but blood and ash. Europe called them the Northmen, the pagans, the scourge of God. We call them Vikings. For 3 centuries, these Norse raiders terrorized every coastline in Europe. They sacked Paris. They conquered England. They discovered America 500 years before Columbus. But here's what most people don't know. The Vikings weren't just raiders. They were the most sophisticated traders and explorers of their age. They built trading empires that stretched from Baghdad to Newfoundland. They founded cities that still exist today. They literally created the nation of Russia. The word Viking doesn't mean warrior. It means to go raiding. It was something you did, not something you were. These weren't mindless barbarians. They were Norse farmers and merchants who went Viking in the summer to get rich. So how did Scandinavian farmers become the most feared warriors in Europe? How did raiders become kings and merchants? And why did the Viking Age suddenly end after dominating Europe for 3 centuries? Let's find out. To understand the Vikings, you need to understand where they came from. Scandinavia in the 700s was cold, mountainous, and crowded. You couldn't farm much of it. The growing season was short. Resources were limited. But the Norse had one massive advantage. They were the best shipbuilders in the world. The Viking longship was a masterpiece of engineering. Shallow draft, so it could sail up rivers. Light enough to carry overland. Fast enough to outrun any other ship, and flexible. The hull could bend with the waves instead of breaking. Most importantly, longships were ocean-going vessels. While other European ships hugged coastlines, Vikings could cross open ocean. This gave them strategic mobility nobody could match. They could appear anywhere, strike fast, and disappear before anyone could respond. And in 793, they realized they could use this advantage to get rich. The raid on Lindisfarne was a revelation. Christian monasteries were basically unguarded treasure houses. Gold chalices, silver crosses, valuable manuscripts, all sitting on isolated coastlines with no defenses. The Vikings hit them again and again. Monasteries across England, Ireland, and Scotland were sacked. The phrase, "Deliver us from the fury of the Northmen," was added to Christian prayers. But raiding wasn't random violence. It was economics. Young Norsemen had limited options. The oldest son inherited the farm. Everyone else needed to make their own fortune. So they went Viking. A successful raid could set you up for life. You'd come home with silver, slaves, weapons, and status. You could buy land, get married, start a family. Raiding was seasonal work. You'd farm in the spring, raid in the summer, come home for harvest. It was a business model, and business was good. By the mid-800s, Vikings had moved beyond hit-and-run raids. They started conquering territory. In 865, the Great Heathen Army invaded England, not to raid, to conquer. Led by the sons of the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok, they carved out the Danelaw, a massive Viking kingdom covering half of England. Vikings founded Dublin as a permanent base in Ireland. They conquered Normandy in France, literally land of the Northmen. They established the Kingdom of York. These weren't temporary camps. They were permanent settlements. Vikings were becoming English, Irish, and French. But here's what's fascinating. Viking warriors didn't just fight. They governed. They built cities. They established legal systems. Many English legal concepts come from Viking law. The word law itself is Norse. So are bylaw, outlaw, and husband. Vikings founded trading cities across Europe. York became a commercial powerhouse. Dublin became a slave trading hub connecting Ireland to Scandinavia. Norse merchants traded everywhere. And they weren't just raiding, they were exploring. In the 800s and 70s, Vikings discovered Iceland. empty, volcanic, barely habitable. They settled it anyway. Within a few decades, Iceland had a parliament, the Althing, one of the world's oldest democratic assemblies. Then they pushed further. In 982, Eric the Red was exiled from Iceland for murder, so he sailed west and discovered Greenland. It wasn't very green, but Eric was a good marketer. His son, Leif Erikson, went even further. Around the year 1000, Leif sailed west from Greenland and reached North America. He landed in what's probably Newfoundland, 5 centuries before Columbus. The Vikings called it Vinland. They tried to settle it, but conflicts with indigenous peoples and distance from supplies made it unsustainable. They abandoned it after a few years, but they'd done it. They'd crossed the Atlantic in open boats and discovered a new continent. Meanwhile, other Vikings were going east. Swedish Vikings, called Varangians, sailed down Russian rivers into the heart of Eurasia. They established trading routes connecting Scandinavia to Constantinople and Baghdad. The Varangian Rus founded the first Russian state. The word Russia comes from Rus, literally the Viking founders. They built Novgorod. They established Kiev. They became the ruling class of Eastern Europe. These Eastern Vikings weren't raiders. They were traders. They moved furs, slaves, amber, and silver along rivers connecting the Baltic to the Black Sea. One Viking grave in Sweden contained Arabic silver coins from Baghdad. These weren't barbarians. They were international merchants operating across continents. By the year 1000, Vikings had transformed from raiders to rulers. In England, Danish kings sat on the throne. King Knut the Great ruled England, Denmark, and Norway simultaneously, a North Sea empire. In Normandy, Vikings had become French-speaking Christians. In 1066, Duke William of Normandy, descended from Vikings, conquered England. The Norman conquest was basically Vikings conquering other Vikings. In Russia, Varangian princes had gone native, adopting Slavic language and Orthodox Christianity. Vikings had assimilated. They'd become English, French, Russian. The raiders had settled down. So why did the Viking Age end? 3 reasons. First, Scandinavia converted to Christianity. Once Norse kings became Christian, raiding Christian monasteries became awkward. The religious justification for Viking raids disappeared. Second, European defenses improved. After centuries of Viking attacks, kingdoms built fortifications. They established standing armies and navies. Surprise raids stopped working. Third, Scandinavia centralized. Instead of hundreds of independent warlords going raiding, you had actual kingdoms. Norway, Sweden, Denmark kings wanted stability and trade, not constant warfare. The last great Viking invasion was 1066, Harald Hardrada's failed attempt to conquer England. He died at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, and with him, the Viking Age ended. But the legacy remained. Vikings had reshaped Europe. They'd founded nations, built cities, established trade routes, and mixed their DNA into populations from Ireland to Russia. The Normans, Vikings who conquered England, went on to conquer Sicily and lead crusades. Viking navigation techniques enabled later European exploration. The settlement of Iceland and Greenland paved the way for Atlantic crossing. Modern Iceland, the Faroe Islands, and parts of Scotland still speak languages descended from Old Norse. Scandinavian genetics are found across Northern Europe, and the cultural impact endures. The days of the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, are named after Norse gods: Tyr, Odin, Thor, Frigg. But here's the real Viking legacy. They proved that geographical isolation wasn't destiny. Scandinavia was cold, remote, and resource-poor. By any measure, it shouldn't have produced world conquerors. But superior technology, the longship, combined with strategic mobility, turned farmers into warriors, raiders into kings, and isolated villagers into international traders. The Vikings succeeded because they adapted. They started as raiders, but when raiding stopped working, they became traders. When trading made them rich, they became rulers. When Christianity offered legitimacy, they converted. They weren't stuck in one identity. They were whatever they needed to be to thrive. That's why Scandinavian raiders conquered half of Europe while building trading empires that stretched across continents. They weren't just warriors, they were entrepreneurs with swords. The Viking Age ended not because Vikings were defeated, but because they won. They became so successful at integrating into European society that they stopped being Vikings at all. The raiders became the kings. The pagans became Christians. The Northmen became Normans, English, Russians. They didn't disappear, they evolved. And that might be the most Viking thing of all, adapting, surviving, and conquering by any means necessary. The dragon ships are gone, the raids are over, but the Viking legacy is everywhere. In our language, our cities, our laws, our DNA. The Northmen went Viking, and they never really left.